Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We're back again with King Arthur, Knight's Tale, and I'm really happy to be talking about Sir Tristan. In my mind, he's the best Vanguard in the game. I'm pretty sure I've tried all of them that I'm going to try. Of course, there are a couple of moralities I'm not able to play with, like I'm not going to be a tyrant Christian or a righteous old faith. And so there are a couple of unique characters I haven't had the opportunity to play with yet, but it's just hard for me to imagine they're better than Sir Tristan. It's not just his mechanics, it's really everything about him. This guy is just pure badass, and I like him quite a bit. One note before we get into the traits. When you recruit him, and I'm pretty sure you recruit him as part of the main quest, his story actually continues through events. I think he's one of the few, he might be the only hero you pick up actually, who has a real storyline that it continues through events after you get him. So even if, you're trying to create a roster space, I would highly recommend you don't delete him until you're able to take that all the way through. And you'll know it's completed when you receive an item, and it'll be clear how you're supposed to use it. And when you properly use it, then you'll know that you're finished, and you can go ahead and remove them from the team if you so choose. If that doesn't make sense at all, just leave me a comment down below. I'm trying to make sure I'm not spoilery, but want to make sure you all see all the content that you can in the game. Okay, let's go ahead and get into his traits. First of all, he is one of the lost, which are essentially undead in the game. So he is immune to poison and bleeding effects. Also, when you run around with him and he talks, he speaks in a gravelly undead type of voice. Super cool. Love all of that. Allegiance. He automatically starts with a +6 in loyalty. So some of you have probably noticed the neutral characters, it's really hard to build up their loyalty because you can't just choose morality options that align with what they believe. So he's one of the few neutral characters who starts with a very large boost to his loyalty, making it much easier for you to try to go ahead and max him out. And then finally, he has tough. Injuries require one less round to heal for this hero. So basically, he has no negative traits. Everything on this list, absolutely awesome. Now let's go ahead and go to the mechanics. So first of all, we have Poison Cut, not Strike. Poison Cut. And if you look at the symbol for it, you'll notice it's not the usual slash with, or knife rather, with blood hanging from it that you would see for all the other characters. That's because there's a select few characters whose main weapons are unique and have a unique effect in the game, such as Sir Percival, who has the flaming sword that actually sears through enemies as opposed to cutting them. So Sir Tristan has the poison cuts. It's two swords that are dipped in poison. So when he's swinging with them, he doesn't actually slash through enemies. Instead, it's a really weird sloshing sound. It's almost like he's using water to cut them. It sounds really cool, and it's even more vicious when he actually kills enemies with it. Absolutely love it. And again, as far as I can tell, it's unique to him. Poison Cut is going to deal 80% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy 2 times and causes poison. Poison suffers 50% damage at the start of their turn and deals 20% less damage. As far as upgrades, the duration of Poison Cut's poison effect can be increased by 1 turn. The effect reduces the target's damage dealt by an additional 10%, so 30% overall. You can increase the weapon damage by 10%, and the effect reduces the target's damage dealt by an additional 10% again. So 20% from here, 20% originally, so 40% overall. He will reduce a target's damage. And when you combine that with counterattack, the hero responds to every frontal attack received with a strike. That means anytime an enemy tries to damage him, unless they're immune to poison, they are going to suffer 80% damage, and they're going to be able to deal 40% less damage. That's crazy. That's crazy and absolutely fantastic. Now, of course, you notice this is all about poison. So it's not going to be as effective against enemies that are immune to poison. When you pick him up, I think it's around level 5, maybe 6. So you're basically two, maybe three main missions away from getting out of that period of the game where you're mostly facing enemies who are immune to bleeding and poison. And then over time, even though you will face undead, because he has so many different ways of dealing damage, you'll still be effective against the undead, even though poison doesn't really do anything to them. So that's not something you have to be concerned about. Moving on, jumps to the target tile, making it very, very easy for you to get backstabs against enemies. As far as upgrades, you can reduce the cooldown by 1, you can reduce the AP cost by 1, you can gain 1 movement AP after using jump, and the tile range is increased by 1. I definitely recommend you pick up these 3 upgrades. I don't think the 1 movement AP helps you all that much, because most of the time when you're using jump, you're either jumping right behind an enemy to do backstabs, or you're jumping far away from an enemy to avoid where the action is at. And jump has a really nice range. It's 2 to 5 naturally with an upgrade. And so 5 tiles away is usually more than enough to feel like you're safe from that particular enemy being able to creep up on you, especially if you have a little more AP and you're able to hide once you've jumped, which we'll go on to in a little bit. So I would say these 3 upgrades are worth it. This one, probably not so much. Next up is Bear Trap. Places a hidden bear trap on an empty tile, dealing 100% weapon damage and causing slow if an enemy steps on it. You can upgrade this where it will cause bleeding. If it's triggered by a unit, their AP is reduced by 2. The AP cost for Bear Trap can be reduced by 1. You are able to use up to 5 active traps. So since it only costs 1 AP, you could throw out 5 Bear Traps on your turn, and you can have the traps deal 15% more weapon damage. I personally don't like traps because an enemy has to step on it in order for it to be able to activate. And of course, enemies could step around it, or any number of things might happen. So me personally, I don't use them. But if you're comfortable with traps, if you're comfortable with the lost AP, if an enemy doesn't actually step on the trap, then you can go ahead and pick this up and pick up its upgrades. Next comes Hide. You are able to become hidden, which means you don't break line of sight for other units and can't be seen by enemies. You also gain 50% surprise damage for your next attack. However, the surprise bonus is lost if you move more than 2 tiles after being revealed, or use a skill before attacking. You can upgrade this where the surprise bonus is retained for 2 additional tiles of movement after being revealed. You can reduce how close enemies have to be in order to reveal you while you are hidden by 1 tile. So basically what happens is you'll go hidden, and if an enemy is close enough to you, like let's say they get within a 3 tile range of you, you'll become revealed. Now, revealed does not mean you lose your surprise bonus. You can move up to 2 tiles or up to 4 tiles if you get the upgrade, and still retain your surprise bonus to get a massive damage boost against a particular enemy. By getting this upgrade subtle, you'll make it so that enemy who was able to see you within 3 tiles, instead they would have to go within 2 tiles in order to be able to see you. Obviously, it's to your advantage to stay hidden, because if they reveal you, even though you retain your surprise damage, they can damage you. And vanguards do not have as much protection as defenders and champions do. So you really want to keep them hidden and out of the fray until they're ready to dive in and stab somebody, and then back out of the fray so that they can keep themselves protected. So Hide is a monster skill. You definitely want that. The other 2 upgrades add an additional 2 movement AP. You have to make a judgment for yourself about whether or not that really helps them. If it does, then go ahead and pick it up. It's not necessarily a bad pickup. And then the other one is going to increase the surprise damage by an additional 50%. So I would say you definitely want these three, whereas this one is kind of situational. Next up is Scout. That's going to give you an additional 1 to Perception and give you 1 movement AP. Perception is used to uncover chests that have been hidden and also enemy traps. Enemy traps in this game are rare. I think there's only about 4 fights where it really comes up. But when there are enemy traps littered across the field and you can't see them, it's a very frustrating situation. So overall, it's just nice having somebody who has perception. I would recommend you want to get perception up to at least around 3. You can do that either by picking up all the scout options that he has in each tier, or if you notice enough chests hidden with perception, you can get a potion that will increase a character's perception by 2, which will easily allow you to just take one of these and get the 3 on perception. So regardless of how you do it, just make sure you have somebody on the team who's capable of it to get the nice gear and items that you'll have for an additional perception, and to be able to notice any traps that are potentially on the battlefield. Next is low profile. Enemies prioritize attacking any other unit if the hero is farther than 6 tiles away. I would say you want to get this because, again, vanguards don't have the type of protection defenders and champions do. So you don't want this guy getting hit up by ranged attacks. And this is going to help ensure that in those rare cases where you can't end the turn hidden, you're still going to be ignored by some of the enemies. And then we've already talked about counterattack. Next up is throwing dagger, ranged attack that deals 100% weapon damage. You can upgrade this where the tile range is increased by 2. It does 15% more weapon damage. You could throw it to an additional person that is going to take 50% less damage, and it's going to poison any enemy that you throw it at. So I would say this is definitely worth it. It's the only ranged attack that you're really going to get. So I recommend you pick this up along with all of its upgrades. Next up is gas trap. You can throw out a trap that does 100% weapon damage to every unit within a 3x3 tile range and leaves a cloud that lasts for 2 turns. You can upgrade it where it does poison damage. Where enemies are weakened, they deal 33% less damage. You can slow all the enemies impacted by the trap, and units within the cloud lose 3 armor at the start of their turn. Again, me personally, I don't use traps. I don't like hoping that an enemy will step on it. So this is something that I always ignore. If you like traps, then of course you could go ahead and pick this up. Master of Traps. You get a +1 tile range for trap skills. As far as upgrades, the hero deactivates discovered enemy traps by stepping on them. The hero loses 2 AP for each trap deactivated. You can get an additional 10% weapon damage for trap skills, +1 turn duration to every damage over time effect caused by trap skills, and the hero can have 1 additional active trap. Once again, I don't use traps, so I ignore all of this. If you do use traps, this is going to help them be more effective, so you would definitely want to pick this up. Next, something I haven't seen on anybody else, Drain Life. Deals 25% weapon damage to every unit within 2 tile range. The hero regains HP equal to 50% of the total damage dealt. You can upgrade this where it'll deal 10% more damage, where the cooldown is reduced by 1, where the range is increased by 1 tile, and the amount of HP the hero regains from Drain Life's total damage dealt is increased by 50%. So obviously this is a way to keep you in tip-top shape in those rare cases where enemies are able to get the drop on you. I wouldn't say it's a must-have, but it's definitely nice to have. There are some cases where an enemy is going to be able to reveal you and you didn't expect it, or you end up getting surrounded, or for whatever reason, you just end up taking damage. And it's nice to be able to heal yourself without using a potion. And oftentimes you can find a situation where you can run in, there's going to be a couple of enemies adjacent to you. You can use this, then you jump out and go hidden and basically get free health for without having to risk anything. So there's definitely something to it. At the very least, if nothing else, you should pick up Drain Life itself, even if you don't pick up the upgrades. If you do like the skill, I would say go ahead and pick up all of its upgrades as well. It's a simple choice for me, especially since I'm not getting Gas Trap or Master of Traps. I have to spend more points in order to be able to unlock the 3rd tier. So This gives me something to spend it on, and for that reason alone, I feel like it's worth it to go ahead and upgrade this all the way. But you can make your own decision. Next up is Robust. You can get an additional 10% vitality and HP from armor sigils, accessories, and trinkets. So if you find that he's getting hit up a lot, and maybe for whatever reason you don't like Drain Life, you could take this instead to try to make him a little more sturdy. We've already talked about Scout. Quick note before we get into the third tier. If you've enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you hitting the like button. I use this information to determine what kind of content my channel likes, and it helps my video spread to more people. I really appreciate all of the support. All right, so starting from the third tier, next up is Jumping Attack. Jumps to the target and deals 150% weapon damage, then jumps back to the starting position. As far as upgrades, you could do 25% more damage if you activate this from a surprise state, so meaning you're hidden first. The cooldown of Jumping Attack can be reduced by 1. You can do knockback to the target, and the range of Jumping Attack is increased by 1 tile. I definitely think Jumping Attack is great, and if you pick it up, it's definitely worth picking up these 3 upgrades. I don't think knockback is really worth it, since you're already jumping back to your starting position, which was more than likely a safe area. And even if it wasn't a safe area, knocking the guy back that you're no longer near is not really doing anything. So me personally, I would say you could leave that upgrade off, but take these 3. And while I do believe Jumping Attack is great, I think there are some other things on this third tier that will demand your attention more. So I definitely feel like you should pick up these 2 before you go to Jumping Attack. So you could do that if you have more points available. Next up is Backstab. Backstab deals 30% additional weapon damage. A monster skill. Monster skill for this build, because jump is going to allow you to get behind enemies very, very easily. So a lot of times you'll be doing backstab damage, and this is going to ensure that it becomes even more massive damage. You can upgrade it where it's going to do an additional 10% weapon damage, an additional 20% weapon damage for surprise attacks if they're backstabs, plus 2 armor piercing when backstabbing, and 20% vulnerability to the target when backstabbing. So I recommend you pick this up and pick up all of these probably first thing. It's just going to make a huge difference to the amount of damage you're able to do. Next up is Alchemist. Decrease the AP cost of skills, causing poison by 1. And of course, you've got a couple of major skills that do just that. You can upgrade this where it's going to do an additional 10% weapon damage for those skills. The duration of poison is increased by 1. Enemies hit by the poison skills have their damage reduced by a further 50%, which is bananas. You add that on to the 40% that you already did here, you basically render enemies irrelevant. That's crazy. And then finally, units affected by poison lose 1 armor at the start of each of their turns. And the amount of armor lost increases by 1 every 10 levels. So it'll end up by 2 by the end. Absolutely fantastic. You really depend upon poison, and this is just going to make all of that so much more powerful. Great stuff. Then you have Smoke Bomb, another skill that I haven't seen on anybody else before. An area of 3x3 tiles becomes shrouded for 1 turn. Additionally, units within the shrouded area cannot be targeted by ranged attacks and cannot target other units with ranged attacks. So, depending upon the makeup of your team, this is really, really nice. If you've got a bunch of characters that depend on ranged attacks, then obviously this isn't going to help you as much. But if most of your characters operate in melee range and you're dealing with a bunch of enemies that are ranged, then you could throw down a smoke bomb and basically render all of their archers irrelevant. For upgrades, you can increase smoke bomb's range by 1 tile. The AP cost can be reduced by 1, and that means that it only costs 1 AP in order to be able to throw this down. Very, very nice. Smoke bomb's duration is increased by 1 turn, and its cooldown is reduced by 1 turn. So you will be able to throw it down every 3 turns. Obviously, again, this is situational, and whether or not it's useful depends upon the makeup of your team. But I just love the idea of an undead ninja armed with poison dipped swords throwing down smoke bombs and running up and stabbing people in the back. That is bananas. That is absolutely bananas. And there's no other character that I've seen thus far in the game that gives you that same feel. This dude is amazing. He is absolutely amazing. And even if you decide that for your particular team makeup, this doesn't make sense, cool. Just get jumping attack instead. Like, this dude is crazy. Next up is quick-footed. The hero becomes immune to opportunity attacks. So obviously this is nice because it allows you to just directly walk around enemies and go to their backsides. Of course, you have jump. So usually you would probably want to use jump in order to do the same thing. But for those rare cases where jump isn't available, quick-footed will ensure that you're still able to get the positioning that you actually want. We've already talked about Scout. And then last is Master Assassin. Hide AP cost is reduced by 1. Starting the turn hidden grants 1 additional AP, making it a lot easier for you to manage the AP cost of becoming hidden. And those are the abilities for Sir Tristan. Like I said, I think he's probably the best Vanguard in the game. Certainly the one that I enjoy playing with the most. Curious to hear you all's feedback. Maybe you all have another Vanguard that you prefer a little bit more, but I just find it hard to believe that somebody else compares to this setup. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.